So everyone, welcome to the Front Authority, our debut podcast. If somebody would have told me that my business partner and I were doing a podcast together, I never would have believed it. You're not going to ever see my camera. You hear his voice, but he is my business partner in the sun, the man, the myth, the legend. Brother Smith, how are you today?
I'm still here. They haven't caught me yet.
Are you running from something?
I'm always running.
Oh, you're always running, but you're always building.
I'm doing that too.
Yeah, just imagine, you grew up in Baltimore, right?
My entire life. Yep, most of my life, yeah.
Did you grow up reading the Baltimore Sun?
No.
Did any of your family members read the Baltimore Sun?
I don't recollect that far back.
Yeah, but you knew about the Baltimore Sun.
I heard about it, yeah.
It loomed large in this state.
I wouldn't.
But imagine, did you ever imagine, did it ever cross your psyche that someday you could possibly own the biggest paper in your state, your local hometown newspaper?
Never thought about it.
Yeah. When did you ever think about, everyone knows you on the broadcast side, not necessarily the print side. When did you take an interest in print?
Let's see, you and I have owned it for 2 years, so it was at least a year before that. I got involved in some discussions with the owner of it, which is Alden Capital, and I tried to buy it then, but I just couldn't get the deal done. And then eventually it got to the point, roughly a year later, I said, I'm buying the newspaper. I don't care what the deal is, I'm buying the newspaper.
But why? Why did you want to buy it?
Because I needed to fix it.
Oh, so, I mean, if you're fixing something, that means you perceive it was broken either by somebody else reading it or by something you heard in the community or whatever.
So I'll tell you what I heard. So
tell me what you heard.
So in the year after, which I couldn't get the deal done during that empty year, I did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people around town, asked them about the Sun, and they all had really kind of negative things to say about it. And they told me what the negative things were, which we won't just discuss here. But what I would tell you is it precipitated me to say, I just got to buy it and see if I can fix it.
Really? And you like fixing things?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So how do you think newspapers, daily particularly, differentiate from daily broadcasts? What's the major difference for you?
Well, look, there's a couple differences. One, television is live, all right? So take Fox 45 as an example, or any television station pretty much around the country does typically 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day worth of live news. Newspaper doesn't do anything live as a practical matter. It's going to, because one of the great failures of the newspaper industry is they're still living like they did 50 years ago. And the world we live in today, people demand instant, I want everything now. Tell me what's happening. Newspapers don't do that. That's one of the reasons they are failing as an industry, is because they just don't deal in the real world in terms of immediacy.
Now, what's the real world?
Real world is, I want to know what's going on right now. So when a newspaper does a story, so to take any place, any newspaper, any place in the country, if there's an event someplace, here's what happens. Television rushes to it, covers it live, if it's material. Newspaper maybe gets there, and they come home and they try and write a story about it. Well, the story's already over by the time the story is written.
But the investigation, getting the facts right, you have far
but
more of a
TV
chance
does
of
that.
that.
TV does that.
Not the way newspapers. No. Sometimes television wants to get it first. I think newspapers are more patient. They're more methodical. You believe in investigation. You believe in facts. I think you have a better shot at getting the facts and making it more accurate for the reader.
I'm not suggesting it's going to be more or less accurate. It's about it's happening now, live, real time. So as an example, if there was an event hypothetically happening in the city that warranted instant coverage because of an explosion or an accident or something, traffic, or something terrible, television's there. It has nothing to do with politics or anything, but if the story is really about tragedy or something, we're live in television, and the newspaper may be there with a photograph, but the photograph won't be in the paper until the next day when the event's over.
Immediacy. It is important.
Yeah, look, in today's world of social media, if you're not live real time, then you're yesterday's news.
You said something at the beginning of this conversation that you bought the Sun, which shows that you care. You want the newspaper business to survive. You believe that you have a formula to make that happen. I will tell you this, and I'm not just saying this because we're business partners and friends first, is that so many people say that the newspaper is better. So I'm trying to see what is it that you believe that you've given to the Baltimore Sun that was not there before, where people really believe it's a better product.
Well, I can answer. That's easy to answer. I can answer that 100 different ways. But I would tell you, it wasn't hours after I bought the paper, somebody reached out to me from law enforcement and said, if I write an editorial or commentary, would you publish it? And I said, sure. And they said, really? I said, why wouldn't I publish it? And they said, well, the Baltimore Sun will not publish anything I've ever sent them. And I said, why? Well, that's a political issue. So I said, I want the newspaper to represent everybody, not just one group of people. It should represent everybody. So you'll notice in the paper today, as you well know, we cover everything. There's nothing political about the paper. We let everybody write in the paper.
Yeah, but listen, I want to make sure I clarify this. Yes, we invite people to write, but we got to make sure you can write.
Well, but that's a separate issue.
Process. No, because we're speaking as owners. I want to make sure people know that there's a process. I don't want you to listen to my business partner just think that you can write a story now. It's going to pop up.
No, it's not a story. It's a commentary.
Commentary, whatever. It's not just going to pop up. Yes,
understood.
But see,
it goes through a process.
Okay, good.
But the point is, people have access.
They have access.
They never had access before.
Well, that person didn't have access. Yeah, I'm not going to say everybody didn't have access.
Lots of people don't have access or didn't have access. Now everybody has access.
I think everybody. I think what you're saying, that when you buy a product as storied as the Baltimore Sun, it's not that you want to eliminate any voices that were already there. You just want to add more and make it more expansive to include more voices that represents the state and the community.
I think we have an obligation in media to be responsive to everybody. Everybody should have the option. So nothing complicated.
So what do you think it will take for newspapers to survive in the future? Let me just first give you some credit. And this is not a salute David moment. I'm just dealing with the facts. David, you saw decades ago that newspapers would soon one day become extinct because of certain writings that you saw on the wall. What did you see? And it came to pass.
I saw the obvious that lots of people saw, except the people in the newspaper industry didn't see it. And they, believe it or not, they still don't see it. That's why thousands of newspapers have closed in this country, as you can imagine that. Thousands of them. Weeklies, dailies, all over the country. And what they fail to understand is one, they're in the news business and they're in the speed business. They got to get their content into the marketplace immediately if you're going to be competitive. And the idea that you're going to write a story that's 24 hours later than the event took place means you're yesterday's news. The world we live in today, and I don't care what demographic you're, whether you're 12 or you're 100, it makes no difference. Everybody wants it now because that's the capability that this cell phone has given us, that capability. Live, real time, all the time. So the Sun paper will, at some point in time in the immediate future, become live, real time, all the time.
Now, one of the things that you are, I want to let everyone know today, this is our debut podcast. The Front Authority, and our guest today, who's our guest today, David?
Mr. Mfume.
Yeah, Congressman Kweisi Mfume will be coming on, joining us soon for our first debut. We're looking forward to him. He's a member of Congress, former chairman of the NAACP. He is certainly an icon and a treasured figure in Baltimore and throughout the state of Maryland, and we look forward to welcoming him on our debut podcast. We're looking forward to it, and we'll be back. Well, David and I are back with the Front Authority. David, you have your homeboy on today, even though he's our inaugural first guest. You and the congressman grew up in Baltimore. What part of Baltimore did you grow up in, Congressman?
I was over on the west side of town.
West side of town.
Went to Douglas. I think you were City College?
I went to City College.
Yeah.
Grew up in Bolton Hill. Went to City College.
Yeah. I was further up from Bolton Hill, up Utah toward Robert Street, up in that area.
No, well.
Yeah.
Mm. How has Baltimore changed? I mean, what was that? 20, 30 years ago? You guys were growing up?
More than 20, 30 years.
50, yeah. 60 years ago.
Thank you, yeah.
I didn't want to say that. But
yeah.
So how much has changed?
I think everything has changed.
Yeah.
First of all, when you talk about the norms are not what they were years ago. And a lot of that has to do with the way people act out what they believe in or feel free enough to do what they want to do. Baltimore, because it's an industrial city, after Sparrows Point closed down and the steel that was there, a lot of jobs went with it. There was a lot of, this has always been a blue collar town, but when you lose a plant like that, it helps to accelerate, I think, the sense of disconnect. And so we went through some real tough years, some real lean years after that happened. But we also failed, I think, to adjust properly. And I thought a good effort was made in 1980 with Jim Rouse and Don Schaefer with the opening of Harbor Place to sort of change the focus and to get it on to tourism, believing if people came in and saw, they would help to describe and maybe even define what the new Baltimore would look like. And interestingly enough, that day in 1980 when it opened, I was there. They had more visitors in the first 3 years than Disney World. I mean, that's how popular it was. And then it trailed off after that, and the issue of crime started creeping in. And by the time we got to 1993, it was out of control in many respects. So it's changed. The neighborhoods, in my opinion, were more stable. The people, blue collar as they were, wanted to hold on to basic values, and they were being challenged in many respects. You grew up believing you work hard, you play by the rules, you love your country, you cherish your faith, and you give back. That's been a challenge, not just in Baltimore, but I think in major metropolitan cities all over the country. So,
What are your thoughts, David?
I agree with that. Look, Kweisi and I go back a ways, given that we're similar age. But I remember as a kid, when I grew up in Bolton Hill, walking down Park Avenue to Howard Street, hanging a right, going past the 5th Regiment Armory, down to Hoschel Cones, Heck Companies. It was Baltimore, that area of Baltimore was the center of the universe for everybody. And I look at it today, and it's like everything else that's evolved, it's gone. But that's before the first malls were invented. Right. But now they have malls, and I say we have malls, but we made malls are closing.
That's right.
Faster than anything, driven by a lot of variables. But I remember that well. I kind of wish it was still around like that, but it isn't. But that's called evolution.
I tell you what I find fascinating for those that are joining our Front Authority podcast is that you and David have never met. How is that possible?
Hey, Baltimore's a big town.
Yeah.
Actually, it is. It's called Smaltimore.
It's Smaltimore, right?
But how is that possible?
I don't know.
We live in a different world.
We're traveling two different paths.
Yeah.
But you're both men of power and influence.
Well, that's debatable on my part. I don't know.
Might as well. Let me second that.
I know. So listen. Why do you think some people say that Baltimore has not lived up to its promise? And we understand that one of the reasons why you decided to run after the death of Congressman Elijah Cummings, you felt that there was some unfinished work that you needed to help complete because you have a lot of experience. You spent years in Congress before. You were there before. Yeah. And for you to take the clarion call to come back again, do you feel you had an impact and make a difference in terms of the education, the crime, and the issues that Baltimore still face every day?
I probably made less of an impact on crime as opposed to the Scott administration and what they've been doing over and over again. My job was to get money in for the police department, to get money in for many of these nonprofits that are out there fighting crime every day, and to be able to talk about it in a way that people believe again, that if they just get back to basics, there will be a path to driving crime down. So I don't take full or any responsibility for that, except that I did my job in the Congress to make sure we could get funds into the city and to the state for those that are working on it. But all the other issues, I feel like I made a difference and I'm making a difference. And so whether we look at things that are social, economic, systemic, things change over time. And you either catch up or you get run over by it. And the catching up is the hard part, because first you've got to admit that there's a problem. Secondly, you've got to admit that you don't know the answer. But thirdly, you've got to be prepared to work toward it. That's why I feel so good about so many community organizations that have just cast their buckets down where they are And they've done so to say, this is my small piece of America, and this is why I'm going to make it better. They don't get the attention always, they don't get the headlines or the praise, but those are the ones that are really making a difference. So I think more than anything else, as a representative, my job is to represent a diverse opinion of thought and to try to find a way to reconcile the differences. Sometimes it means taking one step backwards in order to take two steps forward. So I've had a basic motto that guides me, and that is, I don't have permanent friends, I don't have permanent enemies, I have permanent interest. And my interests really go to the heart of the people that I represent here.
You know, David, as a business owner throughout the state of Maryland, and particularly in Baltimore, how do you think the crime is impacting business communities expanding or finding other places where they feel secure in the neighborhoods where they find their enterprises located?
I think Baltimore has two fundamental problems, and it's not just specific to Baltimore, it's specific to lots of places around the country. But to me, there's two identifiable issues that determine the success or failure of a city on a broad base. First is the education system, and the second is crime. So if you look at the education system in Baltimore City, and I'm a product of the Baltimore City school system, at least the last 3 years of my life I was, and I always ask this question, and Kweisi, you must know this, for the last 7 or 8 years, we've been investigating the Baltimore City school system through one of our Channel 45's programs called Project Baltimore. And all it does is investigate the school system. And the statistics and data that come out of these stories that we've been doing are just frighteningly bad. In any case, I often ask the question of some of my very close African-American friends in Baltimore City, and I pose the following question. What would happen if every child in the inner city was accepted on the merits at any one of the top 100 colleges in the United States? What happens to Baltimore City? And the answer is always the same. Everything would be different. To which I then say, well, what is it you don't understand?
Right.
The education system is failing. And when you look at what happens with kids that can't read or write, literally, the magnitude of the failure, where do those kids go? What chance do they have to succeed in life? The answer is probably nowhere. So if they can't read and write and function in the real world, whatever the definition of the real world is today, in terms of getting a job and being productive and a taxpayer, then where do you end up? You end up in the criminal justice system, you end up on welfare, you end up homeless. All those are just deaths in the end. So my first objective, if I could be king for a day, fix the education system, because the ripple effect of that solves all problems.
And you know, I'm one of those that fell through that crack many years ago. I'm a product of the Baltimore City school system also. I had to drop out of school when I was 16. My mother died in my arms. We didn't have very much of income in the house. We all got split up, my sisters, myself, went to live other places. And 2 weeks after her burial, I had to drop out of school to shine shoes at Lexington Market, to carry groceries, to do whatever I could to get money to my sisters, who were then living with my grandmother, who had already retired. So it was tough times. And what I remember more than anything else is wishing and hoping that I could be like other kids that I'd gone to school with, who were having proms. I never had a prom, you know, who were having graduations. I didn't graduate. I had to go back at night and get a GED certificate once I got off of work, which was manual work at Parise's Bakery. And I'd come down here to the Trailway Station. There we offering GED classes, and I did that for 2 years. But I know what it's like to want to be the best and want to be successful, particularly when you're that age. But there are not a lot of avenues that you can go, and there are not a lot of people that will lift you up. So we lose a lot of young people. And when that loss is magnified, as it could be and as it oftentimes is, we lose the ability to shape in many respects the future that we're all trying to build. So I could not agree with you more. Education is a issue that dictates so much of our future. Either we're going to win or we're going to lose based on whether or not we're developing an educated body of young people who will go on to see things differently, work differently, create differently, and give us a better future, hopefully.
This is the Front Authority, David Smith, Armstrong Williams, and our guest, Congressman Kweisi Mfume, and we'll be back. everyone has its criticisms on the Democratic and the Republican Party. You guys have what you call the rise of socialism. We have the descent in our party with what you see with Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly. I wonder if the answer lies in parties anymore for the kind of crises that the world faces. And how does the Democratic Party deal with this rise of socialism, particularly when you saw what happened in New York City? And you have candidates that feel there should be no prisons, there should be no interracial marriages, police departments should be abolished.
Well, the first part of your question about is there really a need for these parties? There were figures released yesterday that show that now a majority of Americans identify as independents. They make their own decisions on whatever the issues are. The increasing concern, though, is that you're usually in a state where you can't vote in a primary if you happen to be a member of one party or the other. So that's a challenge that I think is getting more attention now, because when you look at Maryland, the number of people who've registered over the last few years is significantly different by party than it ever has been. There's so many independents in this state. And sometimes party labels don't accurately reflect where people are. I've had people come to me and say, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And I say, look, every Republican is not my enemy. Every Democrat is not my friend. And that's how I go into the issues that I'm dealing with, because I've been burned both ways. And I know that you've got to judge people where they are, what they say, and then measure it against what they do. So it's put me in a different kind of situation, which is why I said earlier that I don't have permanent friends or permanent enemies, just permanent interests, because it's the interests that concern me. It's the interests that will make a real difference. Now, they may not be the most important or most accurate interests, but you got to have a North Star, I think. You got to know what you want to do and you move toward it. And you do it to the extent you have to if you're a member of a party, a political party. But if you're not, then I understand this rise of independence and people looking at a different kind of populism. What we see with both parties slowly is a realization that it's hard to control the left and it's hard to control the right. Somebody used to tell me that most people are not on the left or right. Most people are in the middle. And that's where you govern from. And we campaign in poetry, but we have to govern in prose. Good regular stuff that reaches and touches the vast majority of people. And that's a very difficult task. So parties have their place. I mean, I remember when, as a student in school, reading about the old Whig Party. And that's going way back. That dates you, because you weren't even around.
That's true.
But you had the Whigs, and then you had here more recently the Dixiecrats during the Civil Rights Revolution during the 1960s, who ultimately became morphing into another party. Parties are going to come and parties are going to go. But the people who have the problems and who need the most and the best representation are always going to be here. Otherwise, we would lose our republic. You know, it was like Ben Franklin, after the Constitutional Convention, he walked out on the streets of Philadelphia and a woman came up to him and said, "Oh, Mr. Franklin, what have you all created?" And he said, for the first time, we have created a republic if we can keep it. And that has been the challenge, to keep the republic, because it's being pulled every way you can think of.
So David, does it concern you as a father of four and a grandfather and someone who's created businesses all across this country? It seems as though that there seems to be a move afoot towards socialism and a stamping down of capitalism. And how do you balance the two?
Look, I think if you go back and look at history, the socialist movement in this country is what it is. I think the majority of the people will be opposed to it in the end. But go back into the 30s when the Nazis were marching down Fifth Avenue in New York City. It's never going to take over the country. I mean, it's just movements come and go.
Yeah.
Right. I think the most important thing is that Middle America, in the end, when they've had enough, will say we got to stop this. Mm-hmm. And they'll say to the left, "You're crazy." They'll say to the right, "You're crazy." And it hasn't. The conditions haven't set themselves in place to the point where that's ready to happen.
Right.
I think it's going to take some time. It's going to take some more controversy and some more violence and some more nonsense before people wake up the majority wake up
Right.
and say, okay, we're done.
Right.
Time to fix it. And I think that's what has to happen. And under those circumstances, people tend to coalesce around things like that.
Mhm.
I think saving the country is the most important thing. I was listening to something on the radio this morning on the way to the office that really troubled me. And it said that 55% of the Democrats in this country would rather live in another country. I thought, geez, that's really a problem. That's a serious problem. If you believe the poll. I'm not saying I believe the poll, but that was the poll. And I think the poll
was
also.
an AP poll. I read it also this morning.
8 people were in the poll.
No, AP, Associated Press
yeah.
poll.
Oh, you read it?
And I think you said 10% of the Republicans said that they think they would rather live in another country. So I tend to, the thing that really probably troubles me the most about what's going on in the world and the country in general is the influence social media has on people in general. People who aren't informed, don't pay attention to what's actually going on, and they read something on the internet on one of these Facebook pages or whatever it happens to be about some nonsense, and they say, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. I got to, whatever. Yeah. Probably the most dangerous thing that's going on right now is what social media is doing to society. It's very scary as far as I'm concerned.
And there are no real safeguards on it.
None.
The owners of Meta and everything else, they're not going to try to put any more guidlines in place.
The government's going to have to.
Right.
So you probably saw this in the news this morning. I think it was Australia that said, now, if using Meta as an example, if you don't comply with the rules in Australia, there'll be a $99 million fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that's on a per event, per person type thing. 16 and under, no internet.
Right.
It's kind of like cell phones in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't have cell phones in schools, guess what? Maybe people are paying attention. If you don't have social media until you're 16 plus, imagine the effect that's going to have on people. Do we get back to where we used to be, which is people used to talk to each other? Nobody talks anymore. Now they talk via the devices. Right. That's not a good way to communicate.
And the young people, I hate to say it that way, but I'm so old I can say it. The young people, particularly under the age of 16, I think are more addicted, if I can use that term.
I agree with you.
To social media and all that it does. I mean, there's so many distractions based on whatever your algorithm is. All you got to do is turn your phone on. You're getting videos, you're getting comments, you're getting crazy stuff. And they, because they're under 16, in many instances, don't know what it's like to have a life without social media. So it's terrible, the fact that so many are getting their news and information from there. And let me say something, this includes a lot of people my age too, who have now just yielded their responsibility to discern the truth from the trick. They've yielded that to social media and whatever the social media platform suggests, or who has the fanciest reel, or who can make it the most creative. No fact checking, no historical context, just words, images, and music. So.
It's full of misinformation, disinformation, all intended to shape people's brains the way whoever the propagator of that is wants it to be done. That's just that's the world we live in. That's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Let's talk about Congressman Mfume, the impact of President Donald Trump on all things, the good, the war, the entanglements that we find ourselves in, the social media tweets, the fact that he has stopped the massive immigration of migrants coming in this country, the fact that he's addressing lawlessness. There are things, and people believe that he fights for them. But talk about the Donald Trump impact, not only on America, but on the world.
Well, if I can start on my neighborhood and then maybe go to the world, because I'm around people every day who get up in the morning, get dressed, go out to a job where they're not necessarily making the best of wages, but who believe that they have to do that and they know they have to do it to take care of their families. So they catch the early bus, as Jesse Jackson used to say. They are there cleaning out bad pens. They're taking laundry out of sick rooms in hospitals, or they're driving a car, can't even say a taxi anymore. But they're doing the jobs that you have to do if you got to keep your family together. And so Donald Trump's impact on them is much more devastating than his impact on other social groups who may be at different places in terms of income and prosperity and all that. Now, so that's the lens that I have to look at first, because again, as a representative, I want to see what's going on, and I hear it every day. I'm in the street, if I'm at the gas station, if I'm at the supermarket or something else. People will disagree with that, and that's their right. They would say, Kweisi, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're making this too simplistic. All I know is what I see. So I'm kind of visceral in a sense. I will react that way. And then you take that out to the world. And my real question is, I was always taught that politics stop at the water's edge. If you got a problem with the president or the Congress or whatever, you don't get in front of other countries and show your disagreements and your weaknesses. It should stop. That ended, I think, way back. Maybe Vietnam was the last time that I actually saw something like that. So on the world stage, his impact, I think, has been to create a situation where world leaders can't anticipate U.S. foreign policy. Foreign policy used to be fixed. It used to be consistent. There would be changes, highs and lows, but pretty much foreign policy was something that was steady. And I think that what you see are world leaders who can't anticipate, rightly or wrongly so, what the president's thinking is on different issues, where he will be on the things that they believe in the most. Why does he berate me as a country? I mean, things like that I think created for a lot of people, a lot of countries, excuse me, a uncertainty that we've not seen before. That's unsettling for me because, the world is a small place. We think it's large, but everything is interconnected. And to the extent that we, the United States of America, can still be the absolute total leader on the world stage in terms of all the things that people care about is very important. Very, very important. And I have problems with how China takes advantage of that, how Russia takes advantage of that, and how France and a couple of other countries in the European side take advantage of it, quite frankly, to suggest to others, you have to deal with us, or you should deal with us. We should be your allies. And I will never trust Putin. I will never trust Xi. They have a bigger agenda. They know that they've got great economies, almost economies at scale when you look at China. And they're looking at a lot of things from a competitive perspective. How do we compete more on the world stage with trade and with income and with all the other things? And given the fact that there are more people in China than any other place on the globe, it just says to me, we've got to be a little more stalwart in our approach and not give away our leadership role by causing people to think that we're unstable as a country.
So someone would ask here on the front page authority, what are Democrats offering that's better, that can rally the country?
Well, I think what Democrats tend to offer more than anything else is a very consistent message on economic issues. But it's seen differently. It seems, I think most people would say, man, it's not consistent. It's not purposeful. It's not going to help us. It's here today, gone tomorrow. But Democrats offer the ability to have that dialogue with all the different groups and parts and pieces that make up the United States of America. And I don't want to use the term big tent. Sometimes you're in a big tent and it's good, and sometimes you're trying to find your way out of the big tent. But that's one thing that I think gives some credibility that people will believe, I hope, that their issue, their concern, their doubt, or their mistrust will be talked about, and that there would be an effort to come to a consensus. Because we're not going to agree on everything at all, but if people believe they can reach a consensus one day, I think they're more willing to participate. And that might be the case more so than with the president, because it's in many times his way or the highway. It's difficult to reach a consensus then, or for people to believe that if I work with him or his party in many instances, that we're going to get there. That, as I said before, one step backwards to take two steps forward. I could be wrong, but I think that's the main difference there. And you got to have believability in a party and in the purpose and people. Otherwise, I think you're never going to attract anybody else. Now, to the president's credit, he was able to go through this last election cycle, win the Electoral College, and get another 4 years to govern. For some of us, that has more to do with the fact that the Electoral College is not the correct way, I think, to elect presidents. I
But
think
he
you have
also
to.
won the popular vote.
Yeah, he did. But I'm just saying that he doesn't pretty much need the popular vote as much as he needs the Electoral College.
So, so David, for us, as we listen to the congressman talk about his party, talk about the president, how do we, as broadcast owners of the Baltimore Sun, how do we cover these stories and present all sides in our media platforms so people can figure out what the truth is and sort of restore that trust and integrity that has been lost in particularly legacy media?
Well, I think you said it. You just said you have to have trust, and you have to present both sides. That's something the Baltimore Sun, as a practical matter, never did. That's something that, look, the media. If you go back, I'll go back 50 years ago. So let's just look at the market. In 1970, when Channel 71, when Channel 45 went on the air, there were two newspapers. It was Baltimore Sun, the News American, and there were 4 television stations, and we were the 4th television station. 100% of all information that flowed into the marketplace came from 3 television stations, because Channel 45 wasn't in the news business, and 2 newspapers. So the reality is the public at large only heard from those sources. Now there's a million sources. The greatest challenge we all have is, what's the truth? And the only solution I have for that is to simply say, if you got this point of view, you want to write about it in the paper in a commentary, if it meets whatever, okay, put it in the paper. And I don't, if you got somebody has an opposing point of view, put it in the paper. I think everybody should hear everything. So historically, what the media has done has been traditionally very much one-sided in terms of its slant. So, and we can go back and look at 50 years of television and look at the things they've done that are absolutely false, created stories that are phony, and that's the media business. I tend to want to look at the media as my responsibility to simply tell the truth, and give everybody the opportunity who has a point of view that's relevant. I'm not here to define relevant, but you don't want goofy people. But if you got somebody who wants to argue a point, let's argue the point. We do this from time to time in the context of what we refer to as town halls, where you got opposing points of view. People get in there and they fight it out. Remember, it used to be a thing on television years ago. Not anymore.
And there was this huge level of distrust against the Baltimore Sun. And it wasn't just because they were the dominant paper at the time. It was because they just gave the information as they wanted to give it, which is why, interestingly enough, the Sun paper had to issue an apology several years back for the way they covered the civil rights movement, the way they covered the Black community. And I thought, when I saw that, I wasn't surprised. I guess I was surprised that they admitted it. And so that's why, in the absence of trust, people will develop positions and postures and beliefs that aren't always accurate, but they're basing it on what they've seen in the past. So I'm glad you said that, because you were absolutely right about that. The trust has to be there, and it wasn't there before.
So there was something that, if you read the paper, there's a little statement I put at the bottom of the paper, which is firmly what I believe. Our job is not to tell you what to think. It's simply to show you things you might want to think about. That's what I view my responsibility as.
Yeah.
And I remember the day I bought the paper, on the day I closed on it and went down and met with the staff. The first thing I told the staff was, from this day forward, the Sun paper will not endorse politicians. It's not our job to do that. Our job is to simply say, if a politician wants to come on television and talk about it, radio and talk about something, feel free. And if there's an opposing view you want to come out and talk, feel free. Yeah. Let everybody see what everybody has to say. I think that serves the public interest in a much greater way than being a one-sided, whether you're left or right doesn't make a difference. That's wrong as far as I'm concerned.
And there was a monopoly on where you got your information in those days.
Yeah.
You got it from the Evening Sun, the Baltimore Sun,
That's
or
right.
the News American.
That's it.
And for those of us in the Black community, we got it from the Afro-American, which we are still doing today. But everything does get back to trust. Do I trust your periodical, publication, news channel, or social media platform to believe it? Problem there is with social media, you don't have to prove it.
Well, why don't you tell us how you feel about our Sun in our candor?
About
our Baltimore Sun and our leadership?
Well, obviously, it's much better than it was. That's why I wanted to talk about how terrible it was. It was racist to some extent. And everybody in the community had that sense. If you were Black, you just did not trust the Baltimore Sun. And now, and I can even go back to some things that happened here, like the Beanie Brothers in the 1950s and the manhunt that went door to door to try to find these two guys who were accused of killing a cop, and how the communities had their doors kicked in, women dragged out of the house, to this citywide dragnet, which I didn't understand then, I don't understand now, but the Sun almost defended that. So you get those kind of positions. So juxtapose that against now, it's night and day. I mean, it's obviously night and day, I think, because I would never want to relive what I went through as a young child, barely understanding a newspaper in those days and seeing how the seniors, my parents and others, felt about the Baltimore Sun of those days.
So I would tell you the reality of the media business is complicated, but there's always one thing that we always tell, and I tell this to all my reporters in the TV business or in the paper, whatever it happens to be. If you can't tell the truth, go someplace else. Mm-hmm. I don't care where the truth goes, but if you can't tell the truth,
right,
then you should go do something else. Because that's our responsibility. I view that as my fundamental responsibility. Tell people what the facts are. Facts can be painful, not my problem. Facts are facts. So,
well, and that's a high sort of standard to live up to every day, because there's so many things that pull us in one direction or another. But I think ultimately we get judged on what we do, what we say, and what people believe, what they trust.
And even in your as we close this out, even in your reelection, to bring it at home, I think Baltimore Sun was very balanced in its reporting, in its coverage, and the access. And we make no determinations, especially when you have people rising to the scene who may serve in places in the city, not with your stellar background, and you let the voters decide. We don't sway, we don't make judgments, we just deal with the facts. We give you the opportunity if you want to come in for our editorial board, if you got a story that you're doing some event in the community that you cover, and you won. I knew you were a little nervous at the moment because you never know where these elections are coming, but you won on the strength of your record and your credibility. And that's what the press should do. The press should just give you a platform, cover all sides with no judgment and no endorsement, because we're not in the business of endorsing people. That's what the voters do on election day. And they decide. And the newspaper should have no impact on it either way.
Well, they decided overwhelmingly when they were gracious enough to give me a 70% margin, which you don't see that often in politics. What it should do is not to make me feel good. It should humble me even more, to make me understand that if I'm doing something that people trust, it's better that they vote on that, on their feelings, than on flyers or slogans and that kind of stuff, because they come and they go. You know, the truth remains forever.
It is. Truth is relevant. It is.
But you know, we appreciate so much having you as our inaugural guest, because you would not be here if you did not respect us and felt we had credibility and would be fair to you. Because unlike many people, you've got a long history of seeing the curtains of history and the curtains of media. And we appreciate the fact that you're saying that you feel that paper is better. We strive for that, but we could be even better. Mm-hmm. It requires resources, and it requires reaching out to people in the community. And when we were trying to decide who we wanted as our first guest, we wanted to reach out to the old guard, the wisdom, the person who has the experience.
Old guard as an age? Is that what you're...
As an experience, not an age. But anyhow, we thank you for joining us for this Front Page Podcast today. And your final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts, first of all, I was always taught to say thank you when somebody gives you an opportunity. And I wanted you to know that I accepted the invitation because of my respect for you. I thought I was going to be on with somebody else. I didn't know that the chief was going to be here with me. But that's good, because we come from an era, you know, we have a different filter on things. We're in that baby boom population where we're always stamped with no expiration date. We just keep going on and on and on. So I'm glad I had the opportunity. I mean, people watching this, listening to it, will agree and disagree with the conversation. But if we don't have that ability to do that, what kind of country are we living in anyway? I mean, the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression is so very, very important. We're all going to be held to a standard, all of us, whether we want to be or not. Some of it will take place on this earth, and some of it will take place with the good Lord long after this earth. But you got to live the way you think is the right way. And you've got to really, through the simple eloquence of your example, no matter who you are. Believe, believe, and believe, and then produce a way to get your beliefs
So
manifest.
how do you solve for the ultimate fundamental problem that exists in this country today? People don't talk. How do you
No.
solve for that? Because I'm a firm believer, if you sit down with people and you have a conversation, you'll find a middle ground someplace, or somebody's view will be changed by virtue of what
Yeah.
might be the obvious.
Yeah.
So
I learn that every day on the floor of the house, every day.
we just don't talk.
You make judgments, and then your judgments get shattered. You say, "Oh, that person is not who I thought he or she was." But the only way you get there is to have a dialogue, have a discussion. And, it's just my belief. It's the way I've been all my life.
Well, look, that's how this country started, with people having conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until social media came along when all of a sudden you didn't have to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. So how do we solve the problem of getting people to put the phone down and start having conversations?
Well, it's easy with kids in school. You can pass laws, which we've done and which you see are now working because teachers get more attention, children get more learning. The problem is adults, I think,
I agree.
that you just can't legislate with, because freedom of everything will be the real issue. But it is a challenge because everybody's a reporter if you've got a phone. Everybody is a social media expert.
Everybody has an opinion.
Everybody is an opinionist, yes. And I don't know how we get around that. I'm always trying to figure out where we're going as a society and what my grandchildren, when they become of age, will see and live and be like in that society. And I can tell you, social media is one of the things that we've got to be able to find a way to control.
Well, some of the countries around the world are starting to solve that problem by simply saying 16 and under, no social media, sorry.
And when I say control, I don't mean take control of, but I mean, we've got to control the ability not for people to make every judgment based on what they saw or heard on the last reel, the last opinion page, or anything else. That's a tough task.
We would be remiss if we did not engage you about how do we make Congress work. It seems to always be paralyzed and always going towards another government shutdown and laying off TSA workers and other workers throughout the bureaucracy.
We need more people to involve themselves in campaigns. The Congress has to stand for election every 24 months. So I've always said there's always been term limits, if you remember the House of Representatives, because every 2 years you have to go back and ask for the will of the people to govern again. But what we've seen, and what we've seen recently here in this last election, is that there's this drawing back of participation. And I think a lot of it is because people don't believe it's going to get any better. They don't think that the Congress is going to do anything. And they have so very little reason in many instances to think that their participation is going to do anything. So the
That's
back
sad.
and forth.
That's sad.
It is. The back and forth between Democrats, Republicans, and independents, that's just going to go on. That's part of a democracy. But when you get people pulling back because they believe that it's not going to make a difference, that's very sad. The last thing you want to lose is the republic based on non-participation, because then you're at the will of whoever does get elected.
Are you worried?
I'm always worried, but I'm always hopeful. I'm always hopeful.
So, David, you get the last word. I mean, this is a debut for you.
You're the king. You get the last word.
No.
King gets the last word.
No, I have no that. I am just so thrilled to see two people. All of us can sit and be gentlemen, can be civil, can be respectful, because at the end of the day, civics still matter in this country. And sometimes the adults don't always set the best examples. And when you talk about social media, every time you turn it on, either a cop is being sworn at, cursed at, somebody's fighting in the restaurant, somebody's pulling somebody's hair. There's nothing social redeeming. They go to the worst common denominator on social media. And you better believe it's impacting young people. They're emulating that kind of behavior. So you ask yourself, where are they getting their values and their virtues from now? Where are they learning civics? Where are they learning that you don't always have to pull out a gun or your fist to resolve a conflict, to find resolution? And until people hear dialogues like this, where people who supposedly be on the opposite side of the political spectrum can come together for the love of the country, and for the good of the country, and for the future of the country, nothing will ever change. It starts here.
So it starts with adults sitting in a room and have a conversation about how do you solve a fundamental problem.
Mhm.
You can debate it all day long,
Right.
but eventually you got to reach a conclusion.
Right.
And that requires a lot of people to sit in a lot of rooms and have conversations.
Mhm.
I wish I could orchestrate that. I wish you could literally take 100,000 people on either side of the spectrum and go to a stadium and say, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Let's find a common ground where we all agree on certain things. And my guess is you could probably do that. In 5 minutes, you'd find where people agree on certain things and where they agree on disagree on other things.
Mhm.
In that context, you can put something together. I don't know how we just don't do those kind of things.
And we're never going to eliminate social media. That's going to be with us for the rest of our lives. The question becomes, how do you use it as a tool for dialogue to take place and for differences to be aired in a way that doesn't just put people down.
Well,
Those are real tough questions.
So yeah, it is a tough question. It's even more problematic because the social media platforms tend to be biased.
Mhm.
So when they decide they don't want a point of view on there and they shut it down, how do the people hear the other side of the coin?
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you solve that problem, whether it's on X or Facebook or whoever it happens to be. It's a problem.
Who was the French philosopher? I think it was Voltaire, who once said, "You and I may disagree, but I will defend with my very life the right
to
of
say
you."
it was Voltaire.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
It's very great. I remember that.
Yep.
But he also said, if it has been done by human beings, I'm very capable of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Armstrong, thank you for putting me in the hot seat. I
Man,
appreciate it.
The hot seat. It's the respectful seat. It's the respect seat. Congressman, how can people get more information on you and your congressional office in D.C.?
They should just give us a call. I return a whole lot of phone calls, more than I
You do.
have time for. Or we've got an office here at 1010 Park Avenue across from the Symphony Hall. And then we, of course, are on Capitol Hill.
You probably don't even know your social media handles.
Yeah, I do.
What
I
are
do.
they? I'm
I
surprised.
do. I do. I know the political ones. Mfume for Congress.
Is there a website?
Yeah.
But anyhow, thank you. We're out of here. Front Page Authority. David Smith, Armstrong Williams, and our very special inaugural guest, the Honorable Kweisi Mfume. Thank you, brother, for joining us. We are out of here.
Thank you.